evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Priscilla Wolf. The bail hearing for the Cuisance sisters wrapped up in Yorkton, Saskatchewan this past week. The sisters say they were wrongfully convicted of the 1993 murder of a local farmer. After spending nearly 30 years in prison, support from advocates across the country came pouring in. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
On day 2 of a bail hearing and on her 51st birthday, Adelia Cuisance looks back at a lifetime institutionalized.
I was talking to my oldest daughter, Haley, and she was mentioning, she was like, wow, Mom, you're 51 today, and you were in prison 30 years and 4 or 5 years in a boarding school, so I've been confined most of my life.
She and her sister, Narissa, arrived at the Yorkton courthouse Wednesday with support from family and advocates, pushing for the two to be released after spending 30 years in prison for a murder their cousin confessed to. Advocates Nicole Porter and Dan Godberzin partnered with Change.org to create a petition to free the Cuisance sisters. They've so far received over 60,000 signatures.
We wanted the country as a whole to know how many concerned citizens there are, and we would like to see ultimately the Justice Minister in Saskatchewan make attempts at reconciliation here. So our big goal was to deliver these signatures to her.
Godberzin wasn't successful in submitting the petition while spending Tuesday outside the Saskatchewan legislature. But signatures are still rolling in from across the country and some from the States.
I'm here for the sisters, the miscarriage of justice. This is 30 years and it's just deplorable.
Senator Kim Pate used to be the executive director of the Elizabeth Fry Society, supporting women in jail. She said she met the sisters when they were first incarcerated.
So what's really important for people to know is all of those breaches, in almost every case, they were continuing to live their lives. They were contributing to the community. I mean, when Narissa was unlawfully at large for over 2 years, she was actually working with people in the downtown east side. She was sheltering animals and fostering them. She was working. She was not posing a risk to public safety. And that what the judge has to look at is, will releasing these two women on bail, pending the review of their wrongful convictions, result in a risk to public safety? And I think the very clear answer is no.
The judge won't be making a decision for at least another month, but Adelia says she refuses to give up hope for a positive outcome.
This should be reconciliation today, and I honestly still believe in my heart that everything's gonna work out today, and I just keep praying every day. My team wouldn't be here if they didn't believe we were innocent.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Yorkton.
According to a coroner's report obtained by APTN, the 2020 death of a 44-year-old Inuk man at Montreal's Bordeaux jail may have been prevented had proper procedure been followed. With another recent death making headlines, questions are starting to swirl around how the jail treats its inmates. Tom Fenario has the story.
He was only 23 when he made this.
For the first time in a while, Annie Hickey Kahnawake is about to watch her brother's documentary. Back in 1999, Bobby Kahnawake directed My Village in Nunavik for the National Film Board. At the time, Bobby was just 23 years old. In homage to his hometown of Pervernatuk, the film shows a side of the Inuit community 1,600 kilometers northwest of Montreal that few ever see.
When you hear about us in the South, it is often through stories of disaster and human suffering. While this does exist, there is far more a kind of joy we take from being together.
Being together is something Annie wishes she could do with Bobby, but she can't. In 2020, Bobby died in Montreal's Bordeaux jail. He was 44 years old.
I think it's not fair. He needed help and support, and he struggled and everything, but he wasn't a bad guy.
According to the coroner's report summary, Bobby Kahnawake died in jail on July 11, 2020, after being picked up by police for aggressive and disorganized behavior in a Montreal business. The report concludes that Kahnawake likely died of a severely irregular heartbeat exasperated by alcohol withdrawal. But the report also criticizes guards and management for not immediately bringing him to the infirmary. According to the coroner, Kahnawake's heavy perspiration, shortness of breath, and state of confusion were among the symptoms they ignored. It also notes that guards left Kahnawake on the floor of his cell for over 11 hours without checking on him because inmates frequently sleep on the floor during heat waves. Coroner Kahnawake Bernard writes that leaving a detainee on the floor for hours when they have already shown signs of physical duress is counter to a directive that states the role of correctional services officers is, in particular, to ensure that inmates are alive and healthy.
Like, who are these people? Like, you know, they're looking at someone and saying, like, it doesn't matter, like, I'm not going to do this job. Every community needs a skilled accordion player. Bobby was one of them.
After some hesitation, Annie has decided to share Bobby's story. For one, she wants people to know that Bobby wasn't just someone who struggled with addiction and being homeless. But she also felt compelled to speak out following another recent death at the same jail. On Christmas Eve, 21-year-old detainee Nikos Dandre Spring died after guards pepper sprayed him twice while he was wearing a spit hood, a kind of mesh mask that is used to prevent biting and spitting. In Spring's case, Quebec's head coroner has called a public inquiry.
I feel like it's the right thing to do, and I feel like there should be repercussions.
Annie feels her brother's case has elements in common with Spring's. Specifically, they both show a lack of care and respect by the guards who failed to follow their own procedures and protocols.
I reached out to the organization that is assisting his family, and I just wanted to let them know that they are not alone. And that's why I was wondering, like, was it the same guard? Was it the same guard working that night?
Bobby's coroner report, released over 2 years after his death, notes that Quebec's Public Security Internal Investigations Division took appropriate measures with regards to the officer on duty the night of Bobby's death. They have also recommended that the supervisor be reminded of his obligations as a manager. Quebec's Ministry of Public Security, who oversee Bordeaux, declined our requests for comment.
I question the training, what the procedures are, the note-taking.
Michael Arruda has spent 25 years as a Montreal police officer and now works as a crisis intervention consultant. He says that it's too soon to make a direct link between the Spring and Kahnawake cases, but they point to issues that need addressing.
I'm also concerned about the supervision. In both of these cases, there was a supervisor, management, that was at the scene and took some decisions. And I'm wondering, are they qualified? What are the training for these supervisors when they're in the middle of this, when they're supposed to be guiding the agents?
As for Annie, who lives just outside of Montreal, she's grateful that there's still a piece of Bobby to be found online. Something that celebrates a place and people that he held dear.
As soon as the nice weather comes, the women love to go line fishing.
Watching it makes me want to go back. I'll definitely visit his grave, like when I go to Odjick again.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
Time for our first break. When we get back, a Mohawk community tries to unite the elected band council and the traditional longhouses. Welcome back. Kahnawake territory across the river from Montreal, Quebec, is looking to bridge the divide between the band council and longhouses. The Kahnawake government's project seeks to teach community members about their history so they can participate in the revitalization of their nation. Amelia Fournier explains how.
If you want to get a drink, it's on us.
In Kahnawake, you can get a coffee with a side of history. Gerald Tayayage Alfred has been holding info sessions at Totema's Cafe for Kahnawake residents about the history of Kanien'kehá:ka governance.
There's a 14-year-old king, and there's like 12 Frenchmen here, and yet they're giving us our land.
A renowned expert on the topic, he's now the project coordinator for the Kahnawake Governance Project.
We have a problem in the community, which is that we don't have a unified way for people to make decisions. We don't have a unified system of selecting leaders and so forth. And so what we're trying to do in this project is give Kahnawake Ron, one of the people of the community, a chance to discuss this, to learn about their history, and to vision forward beyond this system where we have a divided set of institutions to one where they can work together.
The project is in the education phase, so community members can later have informed discussions about their vision for a future government. Many residents of Kahnawake want to return to traditional longhouse government with a clan system and consensus-based decision-making. Right now, the community's funds and services are managed by the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, or MCK. It's the elected band council system imposed during the Indian Act.
The people who see the long-term vision of colonization and decolonization as rooted in spirituality and cultural revival and so forth, they tend to focus on the longhouse. The people that see helping the people deal with colonization in a practical sense tend to focus on the MCK because they're meeting everyday needs.
Finding common ground has been difficult in the past. That's where Community Engagement Coordinator Linda Delorier comes in.
I think it's really hard for people to be vulnerable, given the history that we have. And I think that's the missing ingredient for building trust. And so we're looking for ways to provide people the opportunity to do that safely, regardless of where they come from.
That's what brings the people together, one mind, one body, one heart.
Elder Kevin Deere, a traditionalist, is on the Elder Advisory Board for the Kahnawake Governance Project.
Heck, they talk about Mohawks going all over, building Manhattan, building Chicago, building San Francisco, building bridges. Why can't we build our nation?
Deere says the community has needed a blueprint for a new government for decades.
There was a community meeting where a majority of the people said, well, let's go back to a traditional government. But what does that actually mean? Does it mean that we're going to all come back to the longhouse, that we're going to have condole chiefs, clan mothers, and everything functioning according to the protocols of the longhouse? Me personally, I'd like to say, yeah, that's how it will be, but I'm only one person. The community will decide what they think that is.
He says coming from a place of non-judgment is part of the process of returning back to their roots.
We inherited all of this mess, and we can't be coming from this position of us against them.
Despite Deere's traditionalist attitude, he's supportive of his daughter, the Grand Chief of Kahnawake. Gus Inahawe Sky Deere says MCK is providing the funding, but taking a hands-off approach to the project.
I'm very much open to what the community says and how we're going to move towards something if they're not happy with, the system that we have today. But I think a lot of people don't understand the way this system has evolved over time. We don't have the Indian agent. We're not pawns of the federal government. We don't take direction from the federal government. This is real community governance at its core.
Alfred also says that consensus is something that is ingrained in everybody in Kahnawake, including band council officials.
The idea that you can't just have 50% plus one, and that you can't just, have an administrative tribunal that makes a decision and moves forward, that there needs to be work that goes into hearing all voices, considering all voices, and then taking the best option that most of the people support while still respecting those that have a divergent opinion. That's the way Kahnawake is run.
Delorier hopes this project will ultimately unify Kahnawake.
We're all coming up from a place of trauma from colonization, hundreds and hundreds of years of all of the effects of colonization. And so there's a place where there's a need to heal.
The next phase will involve community consultations and debates with the hopes of a new government framework in place by 2024. Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Kahnawake.
Liberal Member of Parliament Jaime Baptiste is fighting changes to his Nova Scotia riding. A proposed electoral boundary redistribution will move the Eskasoni First Nation to another riding. It's the largest First Nation in Nova Scotia, and it's where Baptiste makes his home. Angel Moore met the MP in his Cape Breton riding.
Came as a total shock and something that I never thought was possible.
That's Jaime Baptiste's reaction that will see two Mi'kmaq communities, Wagnacook and Eskasoni, move from his riding of Sydney, Victoria, to a more rural one.
And then without any consultation, without any words or any involvement from Mi'kmaq communities, to be then told, guess what, we're taking majority of the Mi'kmaq communities out of this riding.
Elections Canada is housed in this building in Gatineau, Quebec. And every 10 years, a federal electoral boundaries commission recommends changes in riding borders in response to population distribution. The riding currently contains the northeastern part of Unama'ki, Mi'kmaq for Cape Breton. Elections Canada is suggesting a smaller one be created, containing the urban communities of the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, while the new, largely rural riding will house the two Mi'kmaq communities. Baptiste learned about the changes when the proposal was tabled in Parliament last November and questions what the Nova Scotia Boundaries Commission did.
This is the area that's being excluded, mostly reserve land. And so how does someone make a boundary and say, we're going to keep this part of all the CBRM except this part right here that includes what? The largest Mi'kmaq communities.
Baptiste is the first Mi'kmaq person elected to Parliament.
And if you look at it, it visibly seems like a Mi'kmaq community is being displaced once again after electing for the first time a Mi'kmaq member of Parliament.
5,000 people live in the Eskasoni First Nation. It's just a 40-minute drive from Sydney. Eskasoni Chief Leroy Denny says his community was not consulted and is considering legal action.
This process should be stopped and be consulted at least give us a say on this. And we feel this could be a personal attack, nothing to do with the party or anything like that. To me, it's a Mi'kmaq representative that is affected, and it's affecting the Mi'kmaq community.
Senator Dan Christmas of the Member 2 First Nation is the first Mi'kmaq appointed to the Senate, says the changes could hurt Baptiste's re-election challenges.
To me, it's almost as if this boundary review was guaranteeing that no Mi'kmaq person be elected as an MP by taking away their voting base.
Baptiste won re-election in 2021 by just over 1,000 votes. He says all politicians are worried about winning elections, but that this proposed change is about not promoting Indigenous representation.
And so, to me, it flies in the face of what Elections Canada have been saying for 20 years about creating more trust, creating more Indigenous participation, and within the first electoral boundary thing that they put out in Nova Scotia, they dropped the ball.
The Nova Scotia Federal Boundaries Commission told APTN News they will not provide any further information about the proposed change. And Crown Indigenous Relations Office said the redistribution process is independent and Minister Mark Miller cannot comment. Baptiste has almost 40 signatures from MPs supporting his appeal. He will contest the proposed changes to his ridings when the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs meets later this year. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, also known as Halifax.
After our last commercial break, friends and fam say see you again sometime to former Vancouver Canuck Gino Odjick. The hockey world lost a legend when former Vancouver Canuck Gino Odjick passed away last weekend. And as APTN's Tina House explains, fans of the NHL veteran from the Kitigan-Zibi First Nation in Quebec will remember him forever.
Gino Odjick was known on the ice as the Algonquin assassin. His role as an enforcer for the Vancouver Canucks was legendary. But off the ice, Gino was a gentle giant. He was a kind and generous person who was very proud of his heritage. Many who knew him say, always with a big smile when he met you, and usually a joke to share, he was approachable and always encouraged others to reach for their dreams.
Words can't express of what he's done to our community here in Musqueam, and I think for all across the province and across the country. His leadership and dedication to Indigenous people goes without words.
In 2014, he was diagnosed with a rare heart disease called amyloidosis. APTN was there when hundreds of his fans gathered outside of the hospital to give him their support. His close friend Peter Leach says Gino fought hard while dealing with his illness.
He displayed a lot of courage, a lot of strength. It took a lot of courage to go through what he did. With all his medical stuff, and that's what it is to me. I mean, he's a true warrior. I mean, took courage to fight what he fought in the last 9 years. I mean, he was supposed to have been, passed away in 2014. He lived 9 more years, so we've got to be grateful for that.
Kirk McLean is a former teammate.
I did not know number 29 was in honor of his father, and the number that he was given in the residential schools, and that, that really got me right in the heart. And that's Gino, right? That's the type of person he was, and just kind of kept that to himself until, a couple months ago when he was inducted into the BC Sports Hall of Fame.
Gino played for 12 seasons in the NHL from 1990 to 2002. For 8 years, he played for the Vancouver Canucks, and then the New York Islanders, Philadelphia Flyers, and Montreal Canadiens. But while with the Canucks, there is no question that he developed a close friendship with hockey star Pavel Bure. Back in 2003, APTN shot an event honoring Pavel, where Gino addressed the crowd.
I'm real happy Pavel made it here. I know in 1993-94, when I scored 16 goals, I know there was a lot of Russian in me. But in the playoffs, when Pavel knocked out Shane Sherlock cold, there was a lot of Indian in him.
Another former teammate, Jeff Courtnall, says Gino made a huge impact on everyone.
Coming here and seeing him battle the way he battled, compete the way he did, and want to score and win the way he did, it was so great to watch him develop.
Here at the BC Sports Hall of Fame, Gino Odjick's jersey, along with other memorabilia, is proudly displayed. He'll forever be remembered as one of the greatest NHL players in Canadian history. Gino Odjick was just 52 when he passed away. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Sebastian Wolf is Cree from the Pasqua First Nation in Saskatchewan. Recently, Wolf had his big break in the AEW, the All Elite Wrestling League. He's not officially on the AEW's roster yet, but he did compete on last weekend's fight card, which aired on the league's YouTube channel. Wolf says it was unexpected. He was called in at the last minute as an extra, but it was a dream come true for Wolf, who was 33. One of his opponents was Matt Hardy, a childhood hero. Wolf's 3-on-3 team lost the match. Now he's hoping to make it on the AEW's roster permanently.
All Elite Wrestling, for those who might not know, they're the second biggest TV wrestling company in North America behind the WWE. So it was a pretty big deal. They have national TV programs on weekly, and it's that came about. I had a connection there, and they got in contact with me.
That's the weekend show, and that's it for me. Until next time, I want to say thanks for joining us, and thanks for allowing me into your homes for the last 2 weeks. Daryl Stranger and Dennis Ward will be back with you next week. I'm Priscilla Wolf. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.